We've done most of our planning on these, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
So with our food parcels, we give a fresh box as well as a non-perishable box so that people have fresh fruit and vegetables and bread.
We're in a church on the outskirts of Bristol. Emma, who runs this place, is showing us around. The volunteers are busy sorting through the donated goods. Their warehouse groans with produce, and it's all being neatly packed into boxes.
We're loading up a selection of fresh vegetables and fruit that come in from the supermarkets. Sometimes we have masses like today, which is wonderful, and sometimes we're a little bit short, but whatever we've got we give out.
This is a food bank, one of the thousands across the country, and in this programme we tell their story. They have become the front line in our defence against hunger, and the emergency food parcels are for those who've been referred here by agencies with vouchers. At this food bank there is a limit of 6 vouchers in 6 months per person. The need is great.
I'm Emma Murray and I'm the Bristol North West Food Bank Manager. So I think the really sad thing is when parents don't eat very much in order to feed their children, and I do see some very, very thin people and shaking a lot. But I also see quite a lot of obesity, so I think people are eating a lot of the wrong sorts of cheap foods, which is quite alarming too. I see things like people coming in quickly opening their food parcel, opening something and swallowing it down. They're so hungry. They've been putting it off for so long. When you see those sorts of stories, that's very upsetting.
The room is full of people whose lives took an unexpected turn that left them reliant on support. People like Heather and Josephine.
I'm Heather Windows. I volunteer at the food bank 3 years ago. I come here because I needed the food bank because my mum died. I can't talk about that yet. And I needed the food bank, and they helped me. So basically, I think if it wasn't for the food bank and meeting Emma and Sinead from the church, I would be sitting talking to you. I'd be pushing daisies up my backside.
I'm Josephine. I'm a pensioner, a 66-year-old pensioner. I've been going to the food bank for a number of years. What brought me here was the price of fuel. I really was struggling. When I first turned up at the food bank, I was very, very shy, and I felt really bad because I had never thought of myself as someone who would end up at a food bank. I rather saw myself as one of the people who would be helping at the food bank.
It wasn't just the food and flowers, it was just the kindness. And it was genuine, it wasn't put on, it was just genuine kindness, and they actually felt my pain, which I thought was really nice. And I haven't felt that for years, not really, not with my mum. Usually my food goes bing, because it goes in the microwave. But I ran out, there was nothing in the cupboards. Literally, there was about 3 tins floating around and a stale bread. And it wasn't, my neighbour said to me, well, why didn't you go to the food bank? And I said, I can't do that. I'm not kind of down that low where I've got to go and rely on somebody else to buy food. But my mum used to help me pay the rent. So I was paying that out. And then I found out I had no money. And I thought, oh dear, I got to go and face it. And I went down and they were lovely. They were really nice. You walk through that door and you're thinking, oh, I don't really want to be here. But they made you feel so welcome. And I had a food parcel which lasted a couple of weeks and more, because it was like biscuits, soup, all stuff you need. And fresh food and pet food, because I got those pets. I was beaming when I seen cat food, because I got 6 cats.
I was running out of food, and it was very difficult to know what to do. So I'd been eating a lot of toast and a lot of baked beans. So it was nice to have a more varied diet. They were very welcoming, and they gave me lots of really, really nice things. They gave me flowers, cereals, and rice. Lots of vegetables, because I'm vegan, and they made allowances for that. The fruit and vegetables were particularly good.
It's hard times. Everybody's struggling. For all the prices going up, mortgages and whatever, but the money ain't coming in.
I think they're wonderful, but I think it's unfortunate that the food banks are actually plugging a gap that the government should really be covering themselves.
Food banks are a remarkably recent phenomenon. Think back to the year 2000, there were barely any food banks in Britain. A decade later, the Trussell Trust had 35. As we begin a new year, there are now close to 3,000, a record number. So how did we become a food bank nation?
looking at the DWP, their own official statistics, in 2022-23, there's 7.2 million people living in food insecure households. That's 11% of the population. That's the scale of what we're talking about. And, urgent action is needed.
1 in 7 people in the UK are facing hunger and hardship. We're not seeing all of those people. So many people are at home not even having the support of an emergency food parcel. And also, we're at a breaking point. We cannot continue to see this year-on-year increase in the number of people coming to us.
I cannot believe that we're back in the 2020s, but particularly in the last 10 years, to rising poverty and, in fact, destitution in many cases. I can't bear the fact that 3 million children are going without essential food at least sometime this week and this month. And I can't bear the fact that children can't get hot food because their families don't have cookers, and they can't have fresh food because their families don't have fridges or freezers or something like that. And so we've got to do something about it.
Gordon Brown is behind a drive to offer something more than emergency food parcels. He calls them multi-banks. They don't just supply food, but household goods too. I'll be visiting one in Middlesbrough and talking to him later on. Multi-banks are a sign of how the food bank movement is evolving to tackle food insecurity. Other initiatives have sprung up too, like community pantries or social supermarkets. So how did we get to a point where even the government admits we have a mass dependence on food banks? Let's start at the beginning.
My name is Dr. Andy Williams. I'm a senior lecturer in Cardiff University. Over the last 10 or so years, I've been volunteering and researching food banks and food cooperatives. It's often kind of traced back to the Great Depression in 1930s America, where the US government used farm surplus and channeled that as food aid. And the first example of a formal food bank is often credited to the 1960s with the establishment of St. Mary's Food Bank in Arizona. And this was founded by John Hengel in 1967 and Robert McCarthy. And it was a place designed where people and companies could donate and deposit excess food, and those in need could withdraw it.
Here's how the St. Mary's Food Bank tells it.
Soup kitchens, shelters, and local churches have been providing free meals for over a century. But these places provide one meal at a time, and only to those who are physically able to show up. Until the 1960s, when a compassionate man named John Van Hengel, along with a few other resourceful Phoenicians, came up with a simple yet groundbreaking notion. With a $3,000 loan from his church, St. Mary's Basilica, John Van Hengel secured an old abandoned bakery in South Phoenix and opened St. Mary's Food Bank, the world's first food bank.
And this model quickly became kind of a model for others to follow. And federal government kind of directly funded one of the organisations attached to St. Mary's, which became Second Harvest. And that organisation spread the food bank gospel across the US. So by 1979, Second Harvest had become a national non-governmental organisation which was channeling large-scale corporate donations across its network, across the US. And what's interesting about this Second Harvest model is that in the 1980s and 90s, Hengel and others went to Canada, Mexico, France, Belgium, where they established food banks. And it's these kind of key figures which kind of led to the expansion of food banks in Australia, to Japan, and now we live in a world where there's food banks in Dubai, in the British Virgin Islands. So it's interesting how this idea quickly spread across the world.
And spread it did, eventually arriving in Britain. But it wasn't until the turn of the millennium that food banks really take root in this country.
The Trussell Trust is often accredited as setting up the first food bank, whilst there are numerous other food banks prior to the Trussell Trust in the 1980s and 90s. In the 2000s, you do have the rapid growth of the food bank model in the UK. And that's largely credited to the Trussell Trust franchise model. So in the 2000s, kind of churches and communities were looking for off-the-shelf projects which they can implement in their community. It was a quick, easy, well-supported idea to put into practice.
Enter the Trussell Trust. I spoke to their chief executive, Emma Revie.
The food bank network, as we understand it today, is a phenomena of the last 10 years, really.
Do you have any reasons why? What's changed in the last 10 years?
So I think the surge in the number of food banks and also in the volume of parcels that food banks were providing really was a reaction to austerity starting to bite. So where there had been some food banks before that helping people who were struggling, the volumes of people struggling to make ends meet really kicked in between 2010 and 2014. And so the numbers of food bank centres were established during that period of time. But still then, over this last 10 years, we've seen such a significant increase. In 2010, we provided about 60,000 emergency food parcels. Last year, 3.1 million. And so it's changes in policy over that time. Social Security simply not covering the costs of people's essentials. We say quite often, food bank use is not a food problem, it's an income problem. People not having enough money to be able to afford those essentials we all need, like food, personal hygiene items, cost of our utilities. And so that's what's driven this significant increase in people not being able to make ends meet.
The 9 million people you highlight who are experiencing hunger and hardship in the UK, according to your latest report, I mean, what are they eating? What levels of hunger exist amongst those 9 million?
Often when people arrive at our doors, they've gone multiple days without having food and have really struggled and cut back on everything, are in cold homes because they haven't had their heating on. So we're talking about people choosing between absolute essentials, not luxury items, core essentials.
You've worked with many governments of both colours. I mean, are you frustrated by the lack of progress on food poverty in the UK?
I'm deeply concerned that this has gone on for so long, has been allowed to get worse and worse. And I fear any acceptance that this is just the new normal. What I'm encouraged by is our current government, in their manifesto, committed to ending the need for food banks. They described the use of emergency food as a moral scar on our country. And that suggests to me a commitment to working with us to end the need for our services. But we need more action. We know what's causing food bank use. We know we have a roadmap and a clear plan for what would need to happen to reduce the number of people coming to food banks. And we have hope as well. We saw under the last government when they introduced cost of living payments, one-off cost of living payments, each time one of those payments were made, we saw the number of people coming to food banks drop off the edge of a cliff, a significant reduction. When people have enough money, they don't come to food banks. So we know what's driving food bank use. We know what the solutions are. And we have a government that has said they are committed to working to the same end as us. So what we need now is urgent action.
The last decade has brought about new types of charitable activity, changing the food bank model, calibrating it to different levels of need. I'm in South London at a community shop, which is a type of social supermarket. Let's have a look at what this place is about.
So we're here at the front door of Community Shop West Norwood in Lambeth, one of our 13 community shops. We are literally in the parking lot of what was the amenities block of the recycling centre that we moved into just under 10 years ago, did it up, and we're going to walk in through the door now, if we can fight our way through this queue of people, into our retail store.
Gary Stott was my tour guide. He's the executive chairman of Community Shop, which buys up surplus stock from supermarket and sells it at a knockdown rate. At his 13 outlets, their prices are eye-wateringly low. Your weekly shop comes in at around 30% of supermarket rates. But to be eligible to shop here, you need to both live locally and be on benefits.
So you come into the store, small retail store, looks and feels like a convenience store.
OK, go on, show me around. The first thing I can see is bacon pieces for 40p.
Yeah, that's pretty good, isn't it?
That is pretty good.
So this is end-of-the-line stuff. When you're doing a manufacture process, we've bought that, we've packed it, we've labelled it up, and you get quite a substantial amount there. And then, you know, again, standards, we've got dairy, lots of dairy on here. We've got some stunningly beautiful tortellini there at 90p. We've got these are absolutely amazing protein yogurts there, quite a large size, 10p.
And milk, 50p. So the essentials are really on the lower side.
The other thing is, you can say, we're not going to say it because we don't want to promote anything in particular, but we're stood in here in front of brands that you recognise.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Brands that you'd say that don't look any different to what you'd feel in a high street store. And actually, here is, so I'm giggling about this, this is a loaf that we call crustworthy.
So you've just taken the ends.
Because if you can imagine in the food industry, for those manufacturers that make sandwiches, and we're talking about 3 million a day, every single loaf that's baked has 2 pieces that nobody will ever use. Some of the public love it, and when you sell it at 20p, it's great. Because otherwise, it's almost impossible to get rid of that.
So this is just surplus, which you've ended up...
we pack off that we label up, and also we'll have other stuff. There's stuff coming on tortillas and sweet things and stuff like that. And this again is the community kitchen and cookery school. So we do 5 different cookery programs where we get people to start to think a bit about food, tell stories. So, you know, we will always say, tell me a story about what food meant to you. How can we weave that into a recipe that we're going to do at lunchtime?
Yes, my boss. You all right?
I'm all right.
Yes.
Are you?
Yes. Jaja.
Big man.
Yeah, what's up? What's up, bro? Yeah, wait, what is this? BBC One and BBC Two? Yeah, we're going to eat
BBC 4.
Or BBC 4. We're having a nice meal in here. Miss Lana is the chef. She's the baddest chef around here, I can tell you. Oh, we got jerk chicken. We got jacket potato. We got, well, everything was very lovely around here, I'm telling you.
We had chicken tikka, we had barbecue wings, jacket potatoes, a variety of salads.
It looks really bright, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And you can see it's gone down very well because there's nothing left.
So who uses your community shop?
So, yeah, the criteria are that you live in the area and that you're on welfare support. It is a bit controversial having a membership scheme, I recognise that, but I think there are some really important reasons for that. I think the first is that, you know, the 2 intended consequences we didn't want to happen was that you create a new form of dependency and you also damage the existing high street because you've got this offer. And I think the membership scheme was a way to try and protect and preserve what was already great in the community by not arriving somewhere and making sure that you suck the trade out of every single person, which is why I think that's really important.
My name is Vivian. I'm a local chappie. I've been using the shop for about a year now.
I'm Giselle. I come here since 2013. It's my second home.
So how often do you come here?
Almost every day.
Oh, really? That frequently?
Yes, because because I have 3 children. It's really helpful for us, for big family, you know. My children, they eat a lot of vegetables and fruits, and it's a great place where I can afford everything. I feel myself like a wealthy person because I can buy a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's savings, big savings.
And how is it compared to shopping in one of the mainstream supermarkets?
It's amazing. For example, here sometimes my bills is like my receipt is £5, £10, and I have 2-3 bags. While I go to Lidl, it's our local shop, for £10 I buy nothing.
And what about you? How often do you come here?
Right, I'm maybe once or twice a week. I mean, my story is everyone's got a testimony, but I recently got diagnosed with cancer. So I sit here and I've got prostate cancer. And somebody here signposted me because I was struggling with a bit of money. But it was after I was on parcels, food parcels. So the shopping experience is amazing. You got about 20 items, you fill up your bag, you walk out, you spent less than £5. Incredible. I've been able to not worry because I know that there is a place to go where I can get some food, whereas I was at one point having 1 meal a day. So now I can have my 3 meals a day. And like I said, the food banks, which are brilliant, I couldn't go back to because I had to wait a certain amount of months. So I would have had at least 2 or 3 months with literally nothing.
And just the comparative experience between the traditional food bank and a place like this, they're quite different. experiences? I mean, what are your thoughts on the comparison?
You become friends, you can become part of the whole experience. You build relationships. Like a food bank, you probably just go in, you may see one or two faces, but you're just going to grab your bag and you leave. Whereas here is you actually getting to know people and relationships are growing. And like I said, you tend to share experiences and become friends. We had a bad experience where a guy was coming and he was unwell for a period of time, and long story short, he actually passed away. He used to come every day for his meals, breakfast and lunch. Very popular guy. I only knew him for a few months. And literally, his family are from up north. They couldn't get down here. And the community shop, everyone pulled together and we had a funeral and we were the only ones in the church. And then we came back here and had a gathering and had a meal and stuff and celebrated his life. So that just shows you how this whole thing just pulls together in a huge, holistic way. This is what I'd coin now as the super food bank, because you get the food, but you get the other things bolted on, the support, the friendships, the continuity.
Because this is a very different look to a food bank, isn't it? But is there quite a lot of crossover with the members of the community to which you're going to be feeding?
I think the good news is that through that entire period of the growth of the food bank network in the UK, other things have been growing too. Because communities are passionate and resourceful and creative. So alongside the food bank growing, we've seen social eating networks of people who gather together to share food growing. We've seen us pioneering the idea of a social supermarket and those growing to be equal in number to food banks in the UK last year. We've seen food sharing initiatives and mutual aid groups growing. So I think what has happened is that a whole range of people have responded to the issue of food insecurity from slightly different perspectives. And I think now we are just recognising that all of those different perspectives have always existed. We have just shone the spotlight on the easiest one to understand.
Gary's start in his community shop, showing that food can help build communities.
Okay, and straight into the middle there. That's great.
On an industrial estate in the northeast of England, a group of civic leaders are getting ready to cut a ribbon on an important new enterprise. It's another variation on the food bank concept.
One.
I've arrived in Middlesbrough at the ex-Prime Minister Gordon Brown's latest venture, the launch of a place called The Junction. Now here is a big warehouse with rows upon rows of goods on the shelves. Everything from plates, cups, bowls, tablecloths, everything you need to set a table. I've heard it's something called a multi-bank, which is a place where you can get a variety of household goods. I can see Gordon Brown just the top of his head in the corner. He's doing a press piece to a news camera at the moment, so I think he'll be a man in demand today, so hopefully we'll get a few words with him later.
Businesses donate unwanted stock to the multibank, which is then given out to people in need. One of the biggest sponsors is also the country's biggest businesses.
My name's John Bamfrey and I'm the country manager for Amazon in the UK.
Can you let me know just how it works? Because I understand that the products you've donated here, they're surplus items?
That's right.
How does an item from Amazon even become surplus?
One way is that it gets returned from a customer and we're not able to resell it. So that's one way. The second way might be we've had the product around for a while, we've not been able to sell it, we've ordered too many of the items, and so it's things that we're not able to sell. That's what a surplus product is. But if I give you an example, if you have a pack of nappies that's got a rip in it, one of the nappies has been taken out, you can't sell that to a customer, but you can absolutely donate it. You might have a 6-pack of beans. Again, it's been ripped, one's missing. They had some porridge oats that have been printed in Arabic that were perfectly usable but weren't available for sale, so we donated some of those items. What was exciting about the multi-bank was the ability for us to take some of these surplus products and connect them directly to families in need in a way that hasn't been done before.
Would some of the products that have been sent here, would some of it have ended up as waste into landfill? Are you essentially not making a saving, but are you redirecting it into a different area rather than it going in the bin, or are you having to pay for it to go in the bin?
So the short answer is no, because we don't send any items to landfill with Amazon. So what we'll try and do, if we've got a product, we'll try and resell it, if at all possible. If we can't resell the item, we will then donate it. The difference with this model is that they're going directly to families in need. And when you look at some of these products, there are things like a set of plates. And you might look at the plates and think, well, what value are they going to have? We heard this incredible story about a single dad who has 2 small kids, and he put a request in, and we gave him some cutlery and some plates. And he said it was amazing because this was the first time that he could have a meal with his family. His kids used to have to eat first. They didn't have enough plates or cutlery for them to be able to eat together as a family. So when you see some of these items and you hear about the impact it's having, it really, that's why we're involved in this.
You faced criticism over not being transparent over how much tax you pay in this country. Wouldn't paying more taxes here help the government help more people?
Well, we're very transparent about how much tax we pay. In fact, we publish a report every year that shows what our total tax contribution is, and that's made up of both the tax that we pay directly and also the tax that we collect indirectly. Our focus with this initiative is really simple. It's to help as many families in need as possible.
You've heard of greenwashing. Is this poor washing, trying to help your reputation?
That is absolutely not what we are doing here. This initiative is simply about helping as many families in need as possible. We started 3 years ago in Fife with one site. We launched last year in Wigan. This year we've launched in Swansea and London. So far, we've helped 500,000 families in need. In the Tees Valley, we're going to help 75,000 over the next year, and we're really just getting started.
Hi. Yeah, I'm the warm-up speaker. I'm going to introduce you to John, and I want to start by saying it's a real pleasure and it's a real privilege to be here this morning.
First of all, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gordon Brown, unemployed.
And also an ex-Prime Minister. So, can we start at the beginning? What is a multi-bank?
A multi-bank is a food bank, clothes bank, furnishings bank, bedding bank, toiletries bank, hygiene bank, baby bank rolled into one. What we're doing is taking a view of the holistic needs of a family. What we're trying to understand is that if people have got to buy food, they probably can't afford to buy toothpaste or soap or shampoo or cleaning materials. They can't afford to buy bedding. They can't afford to buy the kind of furnishings that they need. So we think of a family sitting down to eat a meal, but 2 million families don't have a table and chairs. 400,000 families don't have a cooker, so they're not going to get a hot meal. So when people are struggling and saving and trying to get the money available to make ends meet for getting food, they have to give up on other basic essentials. So I think 20%, the bottom lowest income 20% of the country will spend about 70% of their income on food. And therefore there's not money to do other things. So food banks have mushroomed from 35 when I left power in 2010 to 2,600 now. And they've risen and risen and risen in numbers, despite the fact that the aim of the food bank movement is to make food banks unnecessary by providing enough through other means for people to survive with decent food. But as the food bank network has expanded, so too has the need for other goods. And you don't really want people to have to choose between heating and eating, but that's what they've got to do. And that's why we want to provide help with blankets, with pillows, with sheets, with duvets. And the multi-bank is providing thousands of families with help with that kind of good.
You've called this decade the Hungry 20s. What did you mean by that?
I meant that poverty was getting worse, and that child poverty in particular is something that is completely unacceptable. It's now 4.3 million children, and that this is the worst figure that we've seen, actually. I was brought up in a mining and textile town in the 1950s and 1960s, and I saw a great deal of poverty because there were lots of slum housing. There were travelling people that came to my school. There was unemployment because of what was happening in the mining industry. And I never thought I would ever see that kind of poverty again in our country. And major advances were made in tackling child poverty, child benefit, the child tax credit. And while pensioner poverty has fallen over a period of time, child poverty, unfortunately, has now been rising for many, many years. And because it is now such a big problem and such a big share of the numbers of people in poverty, it's not just about food, of course, it's about all these other items that I've talked about. And we really have to be able to do something to help people in the gravest of need. As the government itself is now looking at its child poverty strategy and is going to issue a new document, hopefully in the next few months. But even now, there is a huge need that's got to be met.
There are in excess of 2,600 food banks in the UK. As you pointed out in your recent Guardian article, twice as many as there are hospitals in the UK. Who's to blame for the situation that we're in?
70% of the children in poverty are in working families. So there's something far wrong with both the reward system for people who are in work and with the universal credit system, where we were at one time committed to abolishing child poverty. So it does need this child poverty action working group that the government has set up. They do need to come up with recommendations. They will have to reform radically universal credit. And of course, given that large numbers of the children in poverty are in work, we've got to look at what's happening to people of working age who are in work, but somehow are either not able to work enough hours or have childcare responsibilities or have got big travel to work problems that make them a lot poorer for travelling to work, or are simply not on a decent wage. And therefore, it's a combination of measures to improve the child benefit system and also to improve the remuneration at work.
Can I ask an obvious question? I mean, why are you doing this? I mean, you could make a lot of money on the speaking circuit, I'm sure. I mean, why are you spending your time on working on child poverty?
I don't think public service should ever become the platform for private gain, so I've always been against that. But what I do think is that growing up in a town where I saw poverty at first hand grow, at my school and when I saw unemployment and poverty, and that's what actually brought me into politics, thinking I could do something about it. I cannot believe that we're back in the 2020s, but particularly in the last 10 years, to rising poverty and, in fact, destitution in many cases. And I don't think anybody who sees that at first hand can sit back and say that they can't help and do something. So I can't stand the idea that a child is growing up without the basics, that they're going to bed, trying to sleep at night without a bed. But 1 million children are trying to sleep tonight without a proper bed. They're either sleeping on the floor or on a couch or sharing a bed with another kid. I can't bear the fact that 3 million children are going without essential food at least sometime this week and this month. Mm. And I can't bear the fact that children can't get hot food because their families don't have cookers, and they can't have fresh food because their families don't have fridges or freezers or something like that. And so we've got to do something about it.
On your website, you spend a lot of time writing about how other people can use the multi-bank model and perhaps set up something similar within their own community. I mean, what's your goal for the multi-bank? Where would you like to see it go?
Well, we started with one multi-bank, and we're now have helped 500,000 children as multi-banks have given out 5 million goods, and that's probably worth about £50 million. So our aim is to service the whole country. So we have one multi-bank in each region of the country, in each nation. We've got one in Scotland, and Wales. We've got one in the northwest, one in London, opening one in the northeast and then the Midlands. And then we want to see hubs developing around these multi-banks so that they service local hubs, so that local communities have got access more easily to the goods that can be available. You see, there are many, many companies across this country who have surplus goods. There are many who are throwing them out, and they think that's the cheapest way of getting rid of them.
Well, it often is the cheapest way of getting rid of them.
And it could be the cheapest way, but they actually also are companies who have a social conscience and would like to do more, particularly for the local community. So I want to encourage any company that's got surplus goods to say to us, we can give you them, and you prove to us that you can get them to people who are in need, and we can do that. And we found something else that has been really quite frightening, that hygiene poverty has been rising. And I don't want people to have to choose between having to buy food and having to buy toothpaste or having to buy soap. We do want families and children to have both of these.
As a nation, we have some of the highest levels of obesity. It's a contradiction, isn't it? This high level of obesity amongst our children, whilst also so much hunger. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what the government is trying to do, and previous governments have tried to do about sugar and the kind of diet that people have. I mean, when we talk about food insecurity, we are actually talking about people being denied regular food that is nutritious and therefore healthy for them. And it is sad that sometimes the cheapest food is the least nutritious and the least healthy. And it's also sad, as you probably know, that children are suffering large amounts of tooth decay, partly because of the sugary nature of the food, partly because access to dentistry, but also because access to toothbrush and toothpaste. And we think that's relatively cheap, but actually if you look at the price of toothpaste, it's not that cheap. There is an issue about the quality of food that people have, and there's an issue about the quantity as well. And I think we've got to do more about the quality as well as the quantity.
In preparation for this interview, I've been reading your book. And one of the things that really struck me in the book was, and I know obviously as a Prime Minister, you'll be busy, but just the schedule you are on from very early mornings to very late night, very high intensity work. I mean, what is fueling that? I mean, do you have like a secret packet of nuts in your pocket or something? How do you keep going?
I actually stopped drinking coffee because I was drinking too much coffee because, it keeps you going, coffee, but it was actually not healthy. I was in government for 13 years, 10 as Chancellor and 3 years Prime Minister. And the schedule is really punishing. But you do it because you want to do the job. And there's many, many people who would want to do the job the jobs that I was doing. So I don't complain about that. But it is a schedule where you've really got to be alive to almost every issue, every moment of the day. And many politicians, as you know, are caught off guard. I was on a few occasions as well. When you're sort of walking out and saying something, you suddenly find it's been recorded. So you've got to be very careful as well.
So no Lucasades, no.
No, I didn't do that. No. Drinking water is actually really important. I found, just keeping hydrated is very important. But you've got to watch your diet because the tendency is that actually today, you're rushing between meetings and everything, so you snack, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and you also write in your book about how your father used to cook a lot of omelettes, and how you had a somewhat limited diet, and you used to go across the road for a roast dinner.
That's my mother was actually very ill for a period of time, and that's why my father became the person who cooked the food. But the only thing he could do was omelette. And he also, because of the war, because he lived through the war and rationing, the way to make omelette look better then was to put flour into the omelette. And so it was eggs plus flour. And I'll never forget that because I probably was eating that three days a week, maybe 4. And yes, and so we had friends that were sort of that fed us at the weekend. But yes, I'm not sure it would be regarded as a healthy diet now.
Has your diet moved on from the omelette?
Yes, but it's not as varied as other people's diets are, and pretty basic in what I eat. And look, I'm very fortunate, and I do think one of the figures that really struck me was that 2.5 million or so people do not have a kitchen table and chairs. So, when we were growing up, sitting around the kitchen table was the way the family came together and for meals. And you just think of homes where you cannot even have the family coming together in that way. So you're lacking food. You don't have a cooker. You don't have a fridge. And therefore, you're lacking hot food and fresh food. And then you don't even have a table to sit around. And that is something that really worries me, that children should be growing up in a way that they're not getting the benefits of family life.
Gordon Brown. And the government is due to publish its child poverty strategy in the spring. Those running food banks will often tell you they wish there was no need for them. The Trussell Trust has said it wants to consign its own food banks to history. But many now offer cafes and social spaces, which would be missed by many. So I'll leave you back in the church in Bristol.
My name is Rita, and the first time I used this service was exactly a year ago. My husband had left. I had 2 young children, had a good job. He literally left overnight, and I had no way of earning money. And I made a phone call when there was nothing in the cupboards. I used to come here Tuesday for my food parcel for a few weeks, but I then came to this little cafe where they always had the best soup in the world, and warm bread, and hugs and chats, and meeting strangers, and just lovely, lovely people. I will never forget Tuesday mornings. Yeah, Tuesday mornings and soup at midday.